Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha with Ice Cream Fitness here. I got a lot of messages this morning over a video that Nick Wright put out, and a lot of my subscribers are just kind of carrying on about it because I think Nick caters primarily to bodybuilders, and I cater a lot to strength athletes and bodybuilders and fitness enthusiasts. And I personally do not compete in bodybuilding anymore, haven't for over a decade, no interest in it, and I'm now a strength athlete. So a lot of my information does cater to athletes, not just bodybuilders and people with aesthetic goals. So a lot of people freaked out over that. And I want to just address a few points that Nick made in the video and kind of give my response and take on it because a lot of my subscribers are asking for it. But hold on, let me give you guys a bicep shot first. Alright, and I want to state up front, I do not have any personal issues with Nick Wright or his channel in any way. I think he is a very hard training young man. He works very hard towards his goals, and I think he does a good job in general of trying to put out information on his channel. So I don't want anyone to think that I'm personally knocking him or what he does. And so if I have any of his fanboys run over here and start talking shit, I personally don't give a fuck what you kids think. I will crush your weak ass little bodies between my iron fingers so you can get fucked. I'm not attacking Nick, so don't take it that way, and if you think I am, you can go fuck yourself. Now, that being said, I want to address a few points. I've noticed that Nick tried to point out that it has been proven that the decline and incline are superior movements to the flat bench for pec activation. Which is, again, as you guys know, I point out a lot of times, finding the most optimal movement for a given muscle isn't always the best way to develop overall size and muscular development. That sometimes, even if something is only 90% as effective as something else, if it gives more overall development, it should still be a mainstay in your program because it produces more overall development. And you can always do a little bit of refinement work to bridge the gap or just do more volume with it to go ahead and achieve maximum hypertrophy. So people overrate these things a little bit. But the other thing that has to be considered there is individual structure. Now, I will very much agree that there are people who structurally, the decline bench removes some of the delt and shoulder activation and it puts a better stretch on the pecs for some people. And for those people, it is going to be a superior mass builder. But if you take someone like me structurally, for example, on the other extreme, someone like me who has a very large rib cage, for me, a decline basically just gives me the same range of motion. And I mean by decline, I mean done on a typical decline bench with that steep decline, anything over 10 degrees, for me replicates the range of motion of a board press. So it takes 4 or 5 inches out of the bottom of the movement for me, and I lose chest activation and it turns into a tricep movement for me. So for me, a decline does nothing but build triceps. And it would recruit some chest, but it doesn't really, I wouldn't think of it as a chest builder for someone with my structure because I just don't get that much pec activation compared to, say, a flat bench. And to me, it looks more like my board press's range of motion. And I'll link you guys a clip of me board pressing this week. So this is part of the issue there, is that you have different structural differences. So you cannot make a universal statement like that when you look at people's structural differences and the type of angles that are on the decline benches. It's not true for everybody. For some people it's superior and for some people it is inferior. And you have to look at those things in terms of individual structure and assess that. Now, the other thing I will point out is that most people who cannot develop a big chest off a bench, other than people who just, the chest is just the genetic weak link for them and they struggle with it, and for me biceps are, and I am very gifted genetically in the chest. I could probably build a 52-inch chest doing nothing but close grip bench presses. Whereas in someone else, there are individuals who just cannot build a chest off of a bench. But I would say, observing Nick's technique, even in the video he linked and in other videos I've seen, I would say his bench technique is a big part of the problem. And as far as even potential injuries, Nick, the way that you're benching is actually quite dangerous. The way I see you benching, that is actually how people get hurt. You don't have proper tightness, you don't have proper scapular retraction, you have excessive elbow flare. So that's actually how you make a bench press dangerous. A properly done bench press is extremely safe compared to a lot of other lifts. I would say it's a lot less injury prone than, say, doing dumbbell presses, if done correctly. And look at how you do it versus how I bench press. So I'll give you an example of me doing some bench press earlier this week. And you'll notice a difference in terms of tightness, scapular retraction, bar path, elbow positioning. So part of your issue is that I think that you struggle with chest development, in part genetics, and I think the other part is the fact that your bench press technique is really far from ideal. And that's fine, because I would say 90% of people in gyms don't know how to bench press anyways, and a lot of people who've been training for 10 or 15 years still don't know how to bench press. So it's not a personal knock, just pointing out that that might be why you're struggling with it a bit. But going back to the safety issue, I really am bothered by this idea that the bench press is considered a dangerous exercise when power lifters have perfected the bench press so much so that injuries from the bench press are extremely rare, even in 400, 500, and 6-pound bench pressers. They happen, but not to the degree that you see it with typical gym rats. And it's because there are things you can do that I just described, and if you look at my technique on the bench press, injuries even with extremely heavy weight are going to be very rare with proper technique and a proper support structure. If you've properly built the rotator cuffs and the whole shoulder girdle and the rear delts, injuries to your shoulders from bench pressing are going to be relatively rare, even if you get brutally strong. So it's more of a program issue as far as building support muscles than it is an issue of people not benching correctly. And I could make the argument that I personally think that doing a proper power bench, you are less likely to get injured than you are doing heavy dumbbell presses. And I don't want to go into all the details there, but it has to do with just getting them into position, stability issues. I think that is actually slightly more dangerous in terms of something going wrong and causing an injury. And again, I want to reiterate that a properly executed bench press is a fairly safe movement. Injuries are going to be rare if you are doing it correctly, paying attention to your setup, paying attention to your technique, paying attention to your bar path, the way you do the movement. It can be an extremely safe movement even for people bench pressing 500 pounds. At least relative, because honestly you could get hurt and injured permanently doing a concentration curl. So I mean, any injury can happen, but I consider the bench press, if executed correctly, to be a very safe exercise in comparison to a lot of other popular movements that people do every day in gyms. Alright guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.